Celtic Ligers, Celtic Ligers, Celtic Ligers, Celtic Ligers, Celtic.
Time to set the record straight. Ken Livingstone is not anti-Semitic.
I was like, because I was reading stuff and there was things, there was criticism of Israel, and I was kind of on the warpath reading all the stuff that was happening to Corbyn. So I was like, this guy's probably not even guilty either. And then I started to read the stuff he said. I was like, oh no, he's very much an anti-Semite.
That's it. He's like talking to the Jewish reporter, and he's like, "You're like a fucking guard at Auschwitz." Or what was the other thing that was really extreme?
He said that Hitler was a supporter of Zionism.
Yeah.
And then he said one of the other things that he was claimed to have said was, "I don't expect Jewish people to vote for me because they're rich," you know. And he claimed that, oh no, that wasn't what I actually said, but rich people don't vote for me, and let's just say, you know, who are the rich people? I'm just gonna say it, you know. And it's like, even to be honest, like he says, oh, I didn't say that. I don't believe him at all. No. I believe that he did say that, and I believe that even if he didn't say it publicly, he definitely thinks it. All right. So there was Ken Livingstone and another Labour MP. I think. What are the results of the report? So the report is from the EHRC, which stands for...
Wait, let's say what we're doing.
Equality and Human Rights Commission.
Okay, this is an emergency podcast.
Yeah, they got our boy Corbyn, and we're coming out to be like...
he's been suspended from the Labour Party.
And apparently, it's likely he'll be expelled from the Labour Party.
Really?
Well, it's because, I was listening to Navarra Media last night, and they were talking to Aaron Bastani, and he was like, there's no other option but for him to be expelled, because otherwise it's a sign of weakness. Do you know what I mean? What we know about Keir Starmer is that he, you know... First of all, you knew that this was coming for a long time, just because of the way he's treated anybody in the left of the Labour Party. Like Rebecca Long Bailey tweeted out an article by a woman who within the article claimed that the Minnesota Police Department may have learned a chokehold from the Israeli Defense Forces. Training.
I think she just said the police force were trained by the Israeli Defense Force.
No, they were, but she was also implying that the chokehold that they put onto George Floyd was something that basically could have been taught by the IDF to them. But people were like, I can't believe that she said that. But then you kind of, well, you know, not any people we know are like, but they say, you know, like, oh, you can't say that, that's anti-Semitic. But then the other part that gets ignored is like, why were the IDF training, you know, the Minnesota Police Department? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a really close relationship with the IDF, who are basically suppressing, or let's say policing in a I don't know, whatever. They're you know, oppressors. They're you know. What am I getting at? I'm just saying that, like, what's the correlation between Minnesota and their, you know, pretty much their persecuted black community and, you know...
it's like the police in Minnesota see black people the same way Israelis see Palestinians.
But it's like... What am I even getting at? Sorry, I'm really right. We're doing this earlier than I think I've ever recorded a podcast before. 10 a.m.
10 to 11.
But I'm just saying
that, like, personally I believe that the accusation of anti-Semitism is thrown about quite a lot, because, like, even the reporter who published that article, who was like talking about the training,
she wasn't a reporter.
Who was it?
She was an actor who was writing a column.
But then the Independent published a piece talking about how she had the MP who shared that article, they were like, the Independent who published the original article were like, this MP shared some anti-Semitic stuff, and it was the article that they had published.
Yes, exactly. No, they basically said that they had to
It
be.
was the very
you know,
article that they had published.
I know, it's crazy. By the way, I'm looking up Michael Walker's Twitter at the moment. So he's the host of Tisky Sour for Novara Media.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was like, okay, I want to get a little bit more knowledgeable about this. So they were doing a big spread, like Corbyn suspended on, the YouTube page. And I thought it would give me some kind of like little cliff notes of what was going on. Anyway, my dad entered the room and heard me listening to this thing. So obviously my dad we were at the table and I was like, oh, we're doing an emergency podcast about Corbyn. And there was a silence, and then he was like, let's just not talk about this any further. And he was gleefully watching the news and all the people coming out calling Corbyn an anti-Semite. Do you know what I mean?
Really?
And, like, basically a lot of people are seeing it as the vindication, but they don't plan on doing any more research. They're just like, I'll just accept the thing that is being said right now is actually the truth, do you know?
Yeah.
And but anyway, all to say, he came in and I was like, he's like, you watching some Corbyn thing? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh God. And then he saw a picture of Michael Walker, and I think everybody should look up a picture of Michael Walker. But basically, he's how old is he? I guess he must be in his early 30s, late 20s, and he has a completely like shaved head, and then those and like kind of hipstery glasses, and he wears a black t-shirt, And my dad looked at him and was like, Jesus Christ, of course, and walked out of the room. And I was just like, But Novara Media were doing good business last night anyway. They had usually have about 2,000 people watching. They had 7,000 people watching. The video by the time I watched it, and that was only an hour or two after it aired, had 25,000 views. And people were like, just gutted, outraged, just so pissed off. And the consensus of Novara Media was like, please stay in the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And
They want
are
people to stay in, do they?
They're like, there's only two options. They're like, one of the Aaron Bastani, who was also on the show, basically said, he's like, to quote Wolf of Wall Street, like, you're gonna have to make me fucking leave. Do you know what I mean? He was saying like, that's what these people want you to do, to feel like you're powerless. But like, I mean, basically the way that they framed it is in like, we think it's an election between the Conservatives and the Labour Party, but actually just right off the Conservatives, what you need is just to be, thinking about it in terms of agitating within the Labour Party against the lesser of two,
I don't know, like, it seems that it wouldn't be better for all these people to go off and start another party, because like, it just seems like all this infighting weakens the Labour anyway. So like,
yeah,
and then you're just essentially losing a lot of nuance when, like, say there's another election, you spend half your time fighting your own party.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Tories are sort of on brand. Like, you might as well have full control as opposed to fighting for a small amount of control within a completely, Keir Starmer owned fucking party,
Yeah. Well, apparently, I guess, I don't know about the first past the post system, but they're claiming that that's impossible for a third party to gain traction, and they're kind of trapped between these two positions. And it
just feels like more of the Joe Biden stuff, where it's just like, you have to do this, you have to stay. I don't know, like, they're just going to make moves to make it more hard to join Labour. Like, actually, they already did that. Like, when Corbyn got all that support from the new members, they just made it harder for new members to join.
Yeah.
So, like, surely it's better to start a new party that would have a lot of, like, if Corbyn started a new party with people who were supporting him, there'd be a lot of people who would join up in terms of membership, Like, it'd be quite easy it would seem, to mobilise, like, that energized group.
Yeah, and to know that you're not associated with it. I think that, there's an argument to be made for that, just because if 1,000 years of darkness is already determined, as it has been, because Starmer's targeting of the left, it was like, he's going for Rebecca Long Bailey and all these people, and,
exactly,
and then, now he's gone for the fucking king.
Like, think about what happened. Like, when Corbyn got the leadership, he tried to set up a shadow government or shadow cabinet.
Yeah.
And like, no one would do it with him. Like,
that's true.
There's a complete coup against him.
Yeah.
And then the whole machine was against him and hobbled all his movements, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, some of those people aren't elected officials, they're just employees, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's just like, why stay in the Labour Party when it's, like, maybe they are trying to get you to leave, but sometimes that's a reason to leave. When everyone wants you to go, maybe sometimes you go and do your own thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I mean, I don't know either. I mean, it's like, to me, like, you know, like I said, the election's already lost. 2024 is done. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. I mean, like, to Starmer's idea of trying to be as jingoistic as the Tories is really not going to fucking work. Because if you want the Tories, you can just vote for the Tories. Do you know?
That's it. Like, the Tories are already so good at what they do. Why would you want Keir Starmer's version of it?
Yeah.
Because, like, it's already been shown that people... It's not like... what's the phrase they use? It's like the red walls. They're falling. It's like... People are already switching to the Tories. It's not like... I don't know. It's just like people have shown they're happy to switch parties at this moment. So...
Well, this is the worst part, because one of the things that happens with Corbyn's suspension, people, you know, the people who were gleeful about it were like, he actually caused Labour's biggest loss ever since the 1930s. And they always attribute it entirely to him and his leadership and completely ignore, I don't know, a fucking cataclysmic political event that is unprecedented once in a... Like, you go to these people and it's like, he was the one who was a Eurosceptic, who tried to avoid having an opinion on the referendum, and then all these other people... And then when it happened, he was kind of trying to figure out what position to take, because, you know, he had people within his own party saying, we need a second referendum. He had other people saying, look, the damage is done, we need to figure out how to mitigate it. But they kind of, like, you know, never really sought how to do a kind of left Brexit, which would have actually been so much fucking better.
Like, I think Corbyn took a gamble when he was like the Tories own Brexit, you know? And like, if you wanted a clear, decisive Brexit, if that was your priority, you're always going to vote Tory.
Yes.
And Corbyn was like, well, I'm going to, like, let's see if we can make this general election about all the other stuff that's not Brexit, because we can't win on Brexit.
I gotta say, like, you know, like I said at the time when that election took place, is that I'd prefer that they lost on that than won on the other.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
So, like, he was trying to go with, like, reforming the NHS, or, like, the expansion of broadband, or basically, you know, trying to bulk up the welfare state a bit.
Yeah.
And, like, that's what he believes in. He's not, he doesn't like Europe. But, like, he was just like, let's try to make this about the things that make people's lives better, as opposed to this fucking arbitrary Brexit.
But it was too toxic. It was too toxic to touch. And then every time he did, you know, like, I just remember every single... I was following the news about that. At the time, I was like... I typed in Irish politics into Google in 2018. I came up with 2 results, all right? One was like the echo chamber, which was kind of impenetrable to me at the time because I didn't have the frame of reference for what they were talking about. They would often, like, echo chamber often starts off their podcast by going, so what do you think of that, Martin? And Martin's like, well, you know, I didn't know that they were going to do it, but then they went and did it. And you're just kind of like, what are you talking about? What are you referring to? Do you know? And like, there's a presumption that everybody knows exactly what's happening, and it's a great podcast, but I do think it requires a level of knowledge and interaction with Irish media, which I wasn't prepared to give it, given how biased I had seen it being over the past few years, you know. But anyhow, I also then found the Irish Politics podcast, Inside Politics, and the Irish Times Politics podcast, sorry. And so I was, despite my... Without really knowing, I was like basically an Irish lib for about the last part of 2018, because that was the only kind of political media I was consuming, do you know?
Someone said to me that, like, you know, the fact that you only, like, I guess we both only got into politics, you know, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
It's like when we were watching Canadian Guy A.
Yeah,
and he was like, I've only gotten into Crash Bandicoot about 3 years ago. Like, that's how they feel listening to us.
As in, they like go like, how do you know so little?
Well, it's just like, why you've only gotten into politics in the last 3 years, and already you have a podcast about politics.
It's not. I don't like because I'm battling with it. Like I put it out. We say Irish politics podcast with comedy, and I think that the reason for that is that, like I said it at the start, the whole reason that we did it is because, or at least I did it, was because the way that I was looking at the information about politics that I knew and was wondering why it always dated back to 2008. It's because the panel was on RTE, and because of the, there was just a wealth of political comedy around that time because of like the Bush administration. But then when Obama took over, then it just stopped, So that's why it's carbon dated to 2008,
yeah.
But so what I mean is that like there is something to be said about trying to either do a layman's or kind of comedic take of the events, or at least to talk about the events with the knowledge that you're being you don't know everything, and also to approach it from your own perspective, which is somebody who's, I guess I won't say but involved in comedy and the arts in some way, shape or form, because the other politics podcasts were way too fucking dry. So anyhow, like, that's the reason doing it. And also, we talk about this stuff anyway, so we just try to
monetize our friendship a bit.
Yeah, no. Yeah. We've been doing this since we first met. But anyway, no, with the Irish Times podcast, what happened with it was every single thing about Brexit, they were going into like, this is the most audacious maneuver that Theresa May has done. And what Theresa May has done here is very shrewd. And like, we have to look to the benches. What's Corbyn doing then? But basically, like, it's easy to take for granted that like people were hearing Brexit and getting bored and tired. But Corbyn was actually like having to do these things. And every single time it seemed like, aha, gotcha. It would be like the Tories would pull away and do something crazier.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it's just like, after years of failing to, because like the EU is seeing it now. Oh, we settled all the Brexit talks. All of a sudden Johnson's like, all right, let's throw out all that stuff. What the fuck? Do you know, it's like the way that they talk about this stuff, the way that they deal with it is so nonsensical, and everybody's like, Corbyn needs to engage with them and he needs to be strong and decisive. Like, why? Why is there any need for him to do any of that? Because it's not like it prevented the outcome that we're now going to have a fucking no deal Brexit,
Exactly. Like, he was never going to steer Brexit. He was just going to and that's not what he cared about. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think like he tried a handful of times, and then he was dealing with factions of his own party, and mainly he just spent the whole time with, with struggles within the party.
His party hated him. Like, I was reading,
they still hate him. They clearly hate him now.
Yeah.
Like,
but
God,
like,
just
there was a thing where remember there was the shooting in the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester.
Yeah.
And he made this speech and he was like, "This is terrible."
Yeah.
And like, we have to acknowledge that our role in foreign policy is like stirring up this anti-England sentiment, and this is why, these are the reasons why we're involved in these sort of, like why we're getting bombed, essentially. And he was like, it's not to take any blame off the bombers. It's just to say that's part of our role, and I don't blame the troops. I just think like, but then like, while he was saying that, all the people in Labour were like texting each other, just being like, that's disgusting what he just said. Like, people don't blame foreign policy for this. They blame immigration. So why is he saying that? And like, he's making a speech as head of the party, just laying out the truth, and they were just like, this is disgusting, he's such an idiot, and I can't.
It is very funny, the person that those people saw versus what he was actually, because one time I saw like this, I can't remember what the tweet was. It was fairly benign. It was like, my full support goes out to all these people in solidarity or whatever, and somebody retweeted it, and it's like, the type of punditry who hated him, like, J.K. Rowling or David Baddiel, or like just these fucking like comfortable, maybe more socially liberal, only slightly, but basically conservatives, but they hate that they would be called the Tories, so they're in Labour,
Yeah.
And so anyway, he was like, solidarity, we really need to get to solve this problem. And they retweeted and it was like, words cannot describe how much I hate this man. And it was like they were reading this tweet, and it was like, what could you possibly get to hate out of this tweet? Like, what is wrong with you? Do you know what I mean?
I know.
They
They're
just believe
so angry, and like
they believe everything that he says is a lie. So anything that he says that is nice or anything, they go like, "You son of a bitch!" That you would use this to try and make yourself look good. Do you know? But I just want to say about Rebecca Long Bailey that basically, so Starmer has not said what. So basically, what happened is the report was released. It was always going to be released today, and then Corbyn basically discovered out of the epidemic that is anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. There was, and I just couldn't get over it. 2 whole cases of examples within where the Labour Party acted improperly. Okay. But then they don't go into the details of how they acted improperly. One of the things is that, so obviously there's 2, I don't know. I've been reading this for 12 hours now, and I haven't fucking no closer to understanding any of this stuff. But essentially, there was Ken Livingstone, who was anti-Semitic and was kind of forced to resign under the Labour leadership, but there was people who said that the complaints process wasn't fast enough, and they were they gummed up the works. But then, of course, once you see these leaked Labour texts, and once you see these kind of reporting done by people who aren't establishment journalists, that it's like, well, it was very deliberate what they were doing within the Labour Party to prevent these cases from being seen, so they could paint the picture of Corbyn as being not tough on anti-Semitism. And then, so that was 2 cases. Corbyn comes out and he says, 2 cases is too many. Anti-Semitism is an issue we need to stamp out on the left, broadly speaking. But I think, as the report can indicate, that a lot of the cases about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party were overblown, and are exaggerated, and now we need to kind of figure out how to solve this and move forward. And done. And then Keir Starmer goes, well, that's denial of the facts, so you're suspended. And it was like, no, it's not. And also, they keep painting it in the media. It was like, oh, it's an I tweeted this out the last day. I'm getting ahead of myself. Basically, they keep kind of calling it the damning report. The word damning keeps coming up everywhere.
And it's so ironic because these people are genuinely racist. You look at how they treat Diane Abbott. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I didn't realize she's the first black woman to be elected, and the dogs abuse they gave her, and you've mentioned it a few times. That famously, there's one where she's crying in the toilet. She's after receiving racist abuse online, and people are trying to direct the reporters to her to get the story. That's just humiliation. Yeah, no, they really and I mean, and apparently half the abuse of women MPs is directed towards Diane Abbott. I don't know. They're just so obviously racist in so many ways, and then they use this anti-Semitism to harass Corbyn. It's just sort of sickening. And it's like, because the Tories don't do this. The Tories know that they're thoroughly racist. Yeah. So they never call each other racist, because they're just nah, it'll bring us all down, Well, as people have pointed out, some people have referred to it as the darkest day in Labour's history, and then it's that you went to a war in the Middle East that killed however many thousands of people, and that's something that often gets overlooked as well, where it's anti racism obviously goes by a number of it's on a spectrum. So you have a guy kneeling on a black man's neck in America, and that's racism, or profiling somebody's racism. But also just kind of being able to be oh yeah, those brown people over there, let's just send a bunch of drones to fucking destroy them. For what? Based on a fucking lie. Yeah. And and those guys are still in the party. Although I think Alistair Campbell, did he leave, or was he being invited back? Or anyway, I think Tony Blair also has such a large he's always talking about Labour these days. It's they're rehabilitating Tony Blair's image, Yeah.
So, but basically, Keir Starmer has not been specific about why he suspended him. So, yeah, as in, like, what part of what Jeremy Corbyn said was suspension worthy, essentially. Yeah. And an email has been disseminated, a leaked email has been disseminated from within the Labour Party, which is like, if they're basically saying, if you see anybody who's talking about this thing, like basically acting like anti-Semitism isn't prevalent within the Labour Party, and that this paper is kind of indicative of that, you know, then to report them, and that they could face suspension as well. So anybody talking about the paper in an any way critical way is liable to be suspended also, you know.
It's so extreme.
You know, we knew that when this, I mean, I didn't know this report was going to be released. I wasn't really following it all that clearly. But once it was released, you knew that they were planning for this. So you just take it as given that they were already planning to suspend Corbyn regardless of what the results of the thing were, you know? So that they would concoct some reason for it later on. You know, it could have been fucking one case. It could have been, you know, it could have been anything. But the fact that he wasn't implicated himself, it was the Labour Party as a whole. And then to say that the Labour Party has a problem with anti-Semitism when it's like two examples that you could point to that were egregious enough to get into this report, you know?
Yeah.
Not to mention, there were like other stuff, but I think that was like...
He also just tried to address them and the machine was gummed up so he couldn't, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, here's one... Jacobin released an article today about how the the EHRC report was always going to be used as a political weapon, but I just wanted to read these little bits here because I thought they were very fascinating. Basically, the Muslim Council of Britain sent in, so the EHRC isn't like just, for anybody who doesn't know, is something that was set up by Gordon Brown but has existed over previous administrations or whatever you'd call it. So it's a kind of like, it's a civil thing, you know. It's not like something that just exists within the Labour Party. It's a kind of ethics committee that so basically the Conservatives can also be under review for any things that they've done as well. So the Muslim Council of Britain sent in a dossier of complaint of Islamophobia against the Conservative Party. So I'm just going to continue on from this passage. Having received no response from the EHRC, the MCB repeated its call for an inquiry in November 2019 in the midst of a general election campaign. The EHRC would only say that it was mulling over the complaints it had received to determine whether any action is needed. In March 2020, the MCB submitted a fresh dossier with more than 300 allegations of Islamophobia. The EHRC told journalists that it was still actively considering what, if any, action might be taken. Finally, in May 2020, the Commission issued a statement. The Commission issued a statement formally declining the MCB's request, which, quote, would not be proportionate, end quote, since the Conservatives had promised to set up their own inquiry. The MCB dismissed that inquiry as a facade to hide the hundreds of incidences of Islamophobic bigotry we have identified in the ranks of the Tory party. Shortly after this announcement, Newsweek's Basit Mahmood discovered that one EHRC Commissioner, Pavita Cooper, had not declared her activity as a donor and fundraiser for the Conservative Party when she joined the Commission. So, I mean, it's hard not to look at all of this stuff and just be like, you know, these people knew what they were doing when they headed into it, and you know, like, they really fluffed certain things, exaggerated others, because one of the things that they mention is that it's there was interference from Lotto, leader of the opposition's office, into anti-Semitic and investigations against for anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and it turns out the interference was to basically speed up the results of the investigation. Really? Yeah, so the implication is like, oh, they interfered, and it was like they interfered because they weren't getting the results fast enough. And it's noted as well that when Ian McNichol, or whoever, he was like, let me see, what was his fucking deal?
I think it's Ian Nichols, isn't it?
No, it's Ian McNichol. What a fucking face on this guy. Yeah, so the National Executive Committee, which, what is that? Oh, God. Is a governing body of the UK Labour Party setting the overall strategic direction of the party and policy development. So basically it was, the investigations were kicked to there. And in May 2019, John Lansman, the founder of Momentum, writing in the Labour List blog, accused McNichol and his team of delaying action on handling anti-Semitism cases while he was General Secretary, and allowing a backlog of cases to build up which would damage the party and Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. In April 2020, a leaked report commissioned by McNichol's successor Jenny Formby, purportedly for submission to the Equality and Human Rights Commission's investigation into anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, published various WhatsApp message group transcripts which purported to show that McNichol and members of his office failed to deal with anti-Semitism claims, worked against the objectives of the leadership of the party, worked against Labour's objective of winning the 2017 general election, and made offensive comments about Labour members, staff and politicians. So, yeah, like, once he left that position, all of a sudden it became a lot quicker to get stuff sorted. You know, like, not when I say quicker, and not, you know, but the worst part is that watching Novara Media, and I really like Novara Media, is that they consistently accept the framework, you know? Like, well, maybe it's unfair to say that, but basically what they do is, like, nobody's saying that there is an anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and it's something that needs to be eradicated and all this, and then also, like, saying, you know, the EHRC made an amazing document, an incredible document. I'm so glad that we could live in a democracy where they made this document, and it's like, it's just like, stop doing this. It's this weird thing where it's like, you feel like you need to show, hey, I'm not actually biased, okay? I look at this unfair procedure that you have, and I decide, like, you know, that actually I'm going to take it on good faith, you know, and so I hope that you do the same when I offer my criticism. And it's like, it's really not happening.
Yeah,
you know?
that's not how things work. I mean, the first one where they're just like, sure there is, that's like the Dettol promise, where they're just like, you know, where they can't say it kills 100% of bacteria, so they just say 99.9.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't say that there's zero anti-Semitism, so you have to be like, hey, I'm not saying there's none, you know?
Yeah. But then why, like, do we have to, like, ignore it in, not only, like, the idea of being like, there's two examples that they were in this report then of anti-Semitism. Okay, well, I might be getting this wrong, because there might be more cases of, like, anti-Semitic behavior, but in this report, it highlights two people where it was improper, and it showed a kind of systemic, awful thing that was happening with Labour. But, I mean, obviously, like, why, like, so the Conservative Party get away with...
It's like the Trump thing. It's just like, people expect them to be racist, so that they've already bought into they've already excused the racism, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, like, even if this report came out and said that they're really Islamophobic, which they are, people would just be like, oh, well, I mean, obviously.
Did you expect much else, you know?
So, like, just put in a few token, you know, movements against anti-Islamophobia or against Islam, and then sure, we'll get back to business. Whereas the left, I mean, the left always held higher standards than the right. The right can just play dirty and do all these things, but
that's what, like, Stuart Lee claimed. You know, he was talking about Roy Chubby Brown and how Roy Chubby Brown can release these specials saying, too hot for TV, it can't go on. And he's like, well, actually, like, the reason it can't go on is probably because it's not accurate. Because when I was doing my specials for the BBC, or the show, Stuart Lee's comedy vehicle, luxury comedy vehicle, he was, he said that they had to go through loads of scrutiny and, you know, research and, you know, whatever. There was a higher standard, basically. So it meant that the right could say whatever they wanted, whereas the left can't get away with that, you know?
Yeah.
But I hate it because, like, you know, there's a weird thing where it's like people are just treating it no smoke without fire, because that's what I see. Like, I don't think my dad truly believes that the Labour Party is anti-Semitic, especially not when he's seen all the evidence. But he just doesn't like Corbyn. So any time where it makes Corbyn look bad, then that means, okay, that's true then, you know. And then it's so that's what's happening now with all these things. People are just like, well, it may not be true, but the feeling that it evokes in me is very real. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's so.
What do you think? Do you think they're going to be successful? Do you think that Keir Starmer is going to purge the left out of Labour?
I can't believe it that he's the one to do it. Do you know? But sure, I don't know. I mean, what do I? What do
you think?
Yeah,
you've heard of thinking, haven't you?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of have given up at this stage. As in, you know, they're saying, you know, the Navarro guy's like, oh, you know, stay, keep being a member and all this. But actually, Aaron Bastani put another out. He was like, or join a trade union, because trade unions automatically have a vote in the Labour election.
Yeah,
but Labour leadership.
It was historically hobbled by Tony Blair, wasn't it?
Yeah, but he's saying still kind of be, you know, be in the tent pissing out, I guess, you know. But
yeah, what if the tent's filled with piss, you know?
Well, I just feel like, can you fucking stomach giving money to this party knowing how they misallocated the funds, how they fucking spend it to undermine everything that you believe in? It's like, it's almost like people are like, yeah, but if you go third party, it divides the party and it means that the left will never win again. And it was like, well, if the left wins under this leadership, then...
Well, this just isn't left.
Yeah,
like, it's...
exactly.
There's no... people are like, oh, stay in the Labour, but why? Like, just join the Tories, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't... like, if you start a new party, you're not going to be government, but, like, you're going to have an input, and the input is going to be much less dilute, because everyone's working on the same page. Like, that's the benefit of these small parties. So, like, sure, you're not going to get into government even if you're Labour. Like, Labour's law.
Yeah, exactly.
For the foreseeable future. So just do your own thing. Don't spend your whole time arguing with Keir Starmer, because that's pointless. I think he's going to win, and I think it's like, should you? Yeah. What should you do? Like, should you just spend your whole life arguing with him and lose, or redirect your efforts? You know.
I suppose especially because, like, because they literally managed to stoke a fire out of absolutely nothing, and they managed to destroy this man's career and legacy. And for what? Because he wanted to tax them a little bit more, or he wanted to, you know, he believed in a welfare, you know, with more welfare in the state, you know. And it's like, you know, they did that for, like, this harmless man. So then you've chosen this kind of benign, lovely man, and you've decided to paint him as a racist anti-Semite, and everybody else just goes along with it. And I just wonder who's the successor to Corbyn, is what I'm saying, and what are the chances that they have if you can make somebody who's like an allotment granddad look like, you just persecute him and destroy him the way that they have, do you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, here's a tweet I posted about the Journal. I was reading, so I was like, whoa, what the fuck happened? I'll click open the Journal, okay? Because the Journal is a kind of publication that I largely trust, you know, to get a kind of version of the news. But as soon as I started reading the thing, I knew that, oh, okay, this isn't written by anybody in the Journal. Okay. So it says, Jeremy Corbyn suspended from the Labour Party over reaction to anti-Semitism report. So the Labour Party in the UK has suspended Jeremy Corbyn over his reaction to a report into the damning report by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. As soon as you read damning, you're like, okay, there you go. And then down the way, it's like, all it is everybody talking about how disappointed they are in Corbyn's leadership, how he should have been suspended from the party a long time ago, and how tragic it is that, you know, the anti-Semitism flourished under his leadership. And then, of course, you get down to the bottom, and it's the author. Who is it? It's the Press Association. It's not even a fucking, like, our closest neighbour. We can't even write an article about them. We have to actually, like, because I know how it works, as in, you know, you don't have this huge newsroom and all of this money, so very often they use like Associated Press or the Press Association to just take articles from them about like the international affairs and the events of the day, but these ones always have this very partisan liberal bent, do you know? Like they like I remember reading one about George Floyd, and they were talking about the riots that were taking place and all the looting that was going on, do you know?
Yeah.
Like they always have that framing where it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people I need to tell this, but just basically a big group, like a kind of press association thing, just kind of churn out stuff like that. They do have a fucking agenda, and they're not objective. And
well,
I
there's
do
a lot
think
more right-wing funding of these things and left.
Yeah.
And you know, like that's why you're right that the like whenever you read these things, there's a right-wing agenda, and it's because there's more money coming from the right.
Yeah. Or even just accepting the framing, because one of the things we talked about before was that Red Pepper article about British comedy, and panel shows in particular, kind of just regurgitating right-wing talking points. And so Darragh O'Brien was like, no, we gave everybody a good show. Do you know what I mean? We went after Conservatives and Labour alike, and he thought the article was unfair. But what the article was saying is that they just accepted the establishment premise and just kind of kept saying that until it became true. The idea that Corbyn is an anti-Semite, you know?
Yeah.
And that was the only thing they talked about. They never referred to anything else that Corbyn did or what he was talking about. You know, like I think it was because they initially thought that they could dismiss Corbyn as a, you know, like I was saying before, an allotment granddad who is kind of this kind of anorak hippie-ish guy who was on like at every protest since the 1970s, you know, and they thought like, oh, they can just dismiss him as limp, ineffective, he can't get into power, and then he had a surprise victory and upset. They're like, fuck, we can't do that, so now we have to paint them as dangerous, a Trotskyite, he wants to destroy democracy. And then that one didn't even really seem to take either, and then they hit on the anti-Semitism. And the poll that they took was at the last general election is that what is it? They polled people and asked them how many members or of the Labour Party they believed were anti-Semites. Did you see this one?
No.
All right. Let me just look this up. I just want to get the quote right.
Yeah.
Okay. When pollsters asked the British public what share of Labour members faced complaints of anti-Semitism, the average guess was 34%, which was over 300 times the real total. Do you know? So,
really,
like, and then the other thing about it, I was like, again, I was kind of like really I was feeling really depressed after I read this news, and I was like, they can't stop going after my boy. Do you know what I mean? Can they just leave him fucking be? He's not even in office anymore. Can they just kind of admit it was a disgusting witch hunt, you know? And no, they're like, no, he has to be suspended, he has to be humiliated, nobody must ever try this again to try and bring the Labour Party left. So I was looking, Novara Media said like, well, we're doing an emergency episode tonight, Tisky Sarah Corbyn suspended, cool. So I went on to click a button that would remind me when it was on, and I noticed that the chat was already lit up about 4 or 5 hours before the program was meant to start. Okay.
Yeah.
And there was a guy going in it just saying about like mocking all of you fucking leftists who are just crying like when, you know, about this stuff, when, you know, Corbyn, not only is he like weak, ineffective, awful, but he is a racist and he is an anti-Semite, you know? And they were like, people just going like, what's your basis for this? Like, have you not read any of the reports? Are you doing anything? And the guy said, oh, look at all you leftists, you know, you throw up a big fuss about Black Lives Matter, okay? But when it comes to racism in your own party, you don't give a fuck, you know?
Yeah.
And it just, and racism amounted to anti-Semitism. And it's just this thing where it's like, you know, we know that Islamophobia and transphobia, especially in the UK, like there are these things which are very visceral and real over there and need investigation and kind of like stamping out, like actual like anti-white racism, do you know?
Yeah.
Not anti-white racism, sorry. I'm trying to say like non-white.
Yeah, no, you make a good point that these people hate white people. And
yes. No. What I just mean is like anti-Semitism for these people is like, finally, I get to have a racism. I get to be the subject of a racism, do you know? And it's just like, It's and they're not even Jewish. I'm not saying this about Jewish people. I'm saying that these people are like, they find a kinship with Jewish people, and they're able to go to bat for them in a way that they're not able to go to bat for minorities, because they, in some cases, and I'm not saying this that Jewish people are all rich. I'm saying that they are more aligned class-wise with the majority of Jewish people than they would be with the majority of fucking
black people who are what's the word, thrown out in like what was that Windrush scandal?
Yes, exactly. And stuff like that. It's like it's easier to get like, and also they just really hate Corbyn, and a large part of that is the fucking Paul Murphy, Richard Boyd Barrett thing that we're talking about. Isn't anybody who kind of comes from a certain social background and doesn't compromise their opinions or politics is like, well, what's in it for you? Who the fuck do you think you are? I was out there, I tried and it didn't work, so you can't fucking do it, And the animosity comes from that as well, as in like, no, better things aren't possible, and how dare you try to sell a bill of goods to these people, And actually, you're bad as well. It turns out that you're no fucking worse than I am because you're an anti-Semite, And it's like, the evidence doesn't. So yeah, well, at least he's a trot, But then like the other one is he's like we talked about it before with John McDonnell. John McDonnell was like, please just put this fucking shit to bed. Just basically what John McDonnell was saying. I'm not I'm being glib, but I'm not trying to necessarily criticize him, which is he was like, we live here and we need to focus on the UK to win this election. So you need to just basically throw Palestinian people under the bus, Like, I mean, I'd be critical on a moral level, but like on a tactics level, you're like, this is fucking bleeding us. So can you please just say something that instead of equivocating or adding an asterisk to the end of it, just kind of denounce it entirely,
Yeah.
Or did he? I mean, I don't know. I mean, did he feel like he did that? I don't feel like he threw Palestinian people under the bus, but I think he made it incredibly clear at every opportunity that he wasn't an anti-Semite and they were doing their best to like.
Yeah.
Would enough ever have been good for them? But basically, he wouldn't compromise. He wouldn't say like, he wouldn't give up on Palestinian activism. And another thing that I heard after the election was somebody who was sensibly on the left. I think they were a little bit more centrist, but they were on this podcast and somebody was asking, why do you think Corbyn lost? And it was like, because I think that most people saw that he didn't have allegiance to the UK because he was always going on about Northern Ireland or Palestine.
He was like anti-imperialist, and England is like so proud of being an empire that like people read anti-imperialism to be anti-England.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just saying, like, why is that the fact that he didn't compromise on that is actually a strength to me, and I think that he's correct. And in this instance as well, because what happened in I'm getting too excited now, but what happened in the Navarro media thing was they had one of the reporters on there who was very good, but she was saying he shouldn't have said anything about, kind of indicated that the report vindicated him in any way. He shouldn't have said anything about the cases being overblown. He should have just stayed quiet about it and left that for another day,
Mm-hmm.
And they said that on a tactics level, that's what happened. And also they were saying, he anticipated the bad faith actors that were going to come out and he tried to respond to them preemptively when he should have just waited, and not given them any reason to suspend him. But to me, like, this, I think that kind of just shows that he does give a shit. He doesn't like being called an anti-Semite. He wants to be on the record. Look, see, everything that I told you was correct. This report, is a vindication. And they were like, I find that so. There's a point where he is also a fucking human being. Do you know what I mean? And you can only be provoked for so long before you can just say, look, exactly as I said, the cases were overblown. Can we move on? And they're just like, how dare you say the truth? You're fired.
You're fired.
You're fired.
The framing of it by the news was just, I don't know. It was just really ugly. I'm again just bringing Corbyn into it, and just as in, even though it was an indictment of the entire Labour Party and the processes that were even controlled by fucking Blairites and people like that were inept and unable to produce the outcomes that these people claim they want. It still is like, well, Corbyn presided over this party of anti-Semites, you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
exhausting. It's exhausting that like a good man can be so kind of venerated for doing fucking nothing, you know. I don't know. I don't know what to say anymore. I mean, what can you say? I mean, it's so tiring to even keep talking about this.
Yeah, I think that's enough though for the podcast. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so demoralizing, but like it's incredibly unjust. I don't know. I just thought it'd be worth doing an emergency pod because it's good to set the record straight as we see it. You know. What is that? Is that me?
That's you, yeah.
Well, enjoy editing that out. Jesus, I don't know what that is. Will we call it a day?
Sounds like a saw.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I guess we better call it a day. There's not really much more to say, is there? I don't even know if that was, you know, good enough. But there you are.
Alright.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Welcome to a Celtic Ligers addendum. I just forgot the one thing that I'd written down in my fucking Google Docs. And now it's going to have to open again. I have this thing called tab suspender, which closes my tabs, or like, you know, dulls them if they're getting out of hand. So anyway, in a now deleted tweet, I forgot to, Mark Ruffalo put up, so Vice World News had a tweet where they wrote, Jeremy Corbyn has been suspended from the Labour Party after a damning report. So even Vice are now in on the word damning.
Yeah.
I don't know why damning is, you know, it's like that thing where you see the Sinclair broadcasters and they all say the same thing in the United States. Everybody's using the word damning to describe this report that is actually not really that damning, you know. It's kind of just pretty standard. But anyway, you know what I'm saying, where it's just like the damning report that says, did you know that some people are anti-Semitic? You're like,
that's it.
I mean, I had considered it, you know.
Kim Kardashian,
as we've said before,
her husband got her a hologram that said, the anti-Semitism in Labour Party is damning.
Exactly. He's even in on it. So anyway, Mark Ruffalo retweeted it. The hologram?
Yeah.
Think about it. Mark Ruffalo retweeted this tweet, or this whatever, this fucking... Yeah, he retweeted it, and it said, he said, intolerable. Anti-Semitism on the left must be rooted out and made unacceptable. And I just reminded of him, Nick, his face on a Zoom chat next to just a fucking giddy Eamon Ryan looking like a fucking dope, saying, hey, you have to, you know, vote for this coalition because otherwise the environment probably. Yeah, maybe. I mean, the green is in their name, so that's probably what they do, isn't it?
Yeah, anyway, it was amazing how little research you put into that fucking endorsement, you know?
Yeah. And I know it's not even really worth it now, but in the last week or the week before, they did a big, all the Marvel people did a big like fundraising thing for Biden, and Chris Pratt was noticeably absent because he's a Republican. He's definitely voting Trump, like 100%. And people just started going, he's the worst Hollywood Chris. This is a little hashtag or whatever the fuck. Just imagine a bit of crack. And so a bunch of people, including Mark Ruffalo, got into this, just saying, how dare you, just because somebody has a different political opinion to you. And it's like, you're the one talking about the imminent danger that we're all in, and you're saying, and you are at this rally to promote this guy, and you're saying like, hey, let people have their opinions. It was like, if it's a matter of life and death, then fuck Chris Pratt, and fuck Mark Ruffalo. Like,
come on, have some decorum, guy.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, please.
Come on,
decorum.
This is a political podcast. It's like, he deserves our respect.
Yeah, everybody. You know, the one thing that comes up is people say, you know, like basically what I just said there, which is like, if it's a matter of life and death to you, then why do you feel the need to be polite to these people? And people are saying it's because, you know, they think that they have to be better than their opponents, or they think this, that, and the other. And what they think is, if I'm mean, then they'll be less likely to join my team, and I want them to join my team. But you're just like, no, you're an idiot. They're captured. Do you know what I mean? Like, those people who are mean and horrible. It's like, you know, I don't know. They act like the idea of being mean is just exclusive to the left, but it's only the left who can be held accountable for it. Is the thing. You know, you can be mean, horrible, vindictive, and cruel all you like on the right because that's just taken for granted. But as soon as somebody on the left is like, this is a toxic atmosphere that the left is creating, and then the right uses that because they know that it's effective. They know that they can say this and have like people on the Liberals basically be like, you know.
Well, that's it. It's like Fine Gael doing it now, where they're
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
we're getting bullied and online. They're like, we're getting angry tweets.
Yeah.
It's like everybody does.
It's like, man, you said that children's socks were a non-essential item, you
Yeah.
fucking dickhead, you know?
I know.
Like, you can say these awful, cruel, malicious things, not a normal party, you know, or like, what, your fucking balaclava is slipping, etc., you know? And it's like, oh no, that's just par for the course. This is sparring, do you know?
Yeah, that's
but
just verbal jousting.
But when I get called a dumbass because I say that, I don't know, the poor should be taxed for we should give them like pedometers, and for every meter that they walk, you know, we kind of calculate how much air they might even take. Obviously, if they've been for a jog, they're probably taking some more, you know, so this is, I mean, I feel like I'm becoming a fucking liberal. This idea of like, maybe you want to charge them for the air that they breathe. It's like, that's a really dumb observation, do you know?
No, it was fine.
It was funny. It was funny, actually.
It was actually really good.
Anyway, that was literally all I wanted to say is fuck Mark Ruffalo. If there was less of his type around, I feel like we'd be in a way better position. Because I think like the worst part is that people
He's
like
Jewish,
him...
is he? Is that what you said?
Become a patron at patreon.com.